Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Carrie Linklater and I am your chairperson today. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I am joined today on my far left, Mr. Ron Stenning, and to my immediate left, Ray Massicote, and our city assessor today is Mr. Steve Alden, and our secretary is Cindy Finson. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. And sir, if you'd like to come forward and be sworn in. Which one are we doing? So we'll start with the Sultan first.
Please state your full name.
I'll be affirmed.
Okay. Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Do you like to swear or affirm?
Affirmed.
Okay, so please state your full name.
John David Holding.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have anything you'd like me to get to the panel members and the assessor?
No, I,
No, that's fine. Mr. Alden, if you can also read out the business assessment ID number.
Yes, the roll number would be, I'm on here now. The roll number is 29541. The business is AccuQuip Limited, operating as Central Dental Supply. The assessed rental value is $212,640.
Oh, excuse me, I just need the address actually.
Just the address,
Yeah.
251 Salto, and the unit number would be 103.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yes, the assessed value is $212,640. It was based on a leasable area of 23,573 square feet. We used a base rental rate of $6.99 per square foot, added for the standard utility costs, and we did not have any air conditioning applied for any of the space. But I was out there to inspect the premises, and it was determined that we have the incorrect amount of space assessed. At some point back, they had reduced their space, and the new leasable area is 16,274 square feet. And because of that, I do have a revision to change the assessed value to $150,780.
700 and
150,780.
And sir, you're accepting this?
Yes.
Thank you. That's it? Panel, you didn't have any questions?
Well, I'm just gonna, I mean, it's obvious, but you haven't changed any of the heat, electricity, water, you haven't changed any of those?
I did, there was a minor change, because we did not have any space assessed for air conditioning. There is, some nice office space on the main floor of the premise, so I did add for 3,274 square feet of air conditioning,
Okay.
which was not, there before.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yep, thank you.
Director Firm or Sawyer?
Law firm,
Please state your full name.
Thomas Gordon Fraulinger.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Do you have any evidence for
How many copies?
Fine.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Olson.
Thank you. The business assessment roll number is 24673. The premise is 725 Portage Avenue. Business is Crowmore Printing Ltd. We have assessed them for 98,300 square feet. The base rental rate we had assessed them for is $2.80 per square foot. We've added the utility costs for the entire space for heat, light, and water, and air conditioning on 2,350 square feet. So combined with the base rental value and the operating costs of the assessment was $475,560. I do have a handful of comparisons here, although we'll get into it. The building is hard to compare to. The bottom line is I do have a recommendation to reduce the assessment to $421,500. That would be based on a base rental rate of $2.25 per square foot, adding for the same utility costs to come out with that number. These comparisons I do have on a sheet. The first four are similar in the fact that they're loft warehouses. The first two are built around the turn of the century. First one on Logan was 1914. Arthur Street is originally 1899, although it has had some major improvements over the years. 421 Mulvey was built in 1912. The Bannatyne one, 1930. The last one is just another one to find somewhat of a similar size premise. It is a storage warehouse, an older one with low ceiling as well, or low wall height. These rent comparisons range from $3 per square foot up to $750. The $750 one is kind of stands out a lot higher than the others. because of the design, they have fixed up those spaces into smaller loft warehouse space for their businesses, a lot of more office furnish and whatnot. So that one, it is a 6-story building, older one, loft warehouse, but when they are divided up and fixed up, you can generate rents of similar to $750. But otherwise, we have the range is a little bit tighter, $3 to $4.25. The subject property is kind of distinct. It's a 5-story building with a mezzanine in the 5-story part. So the total area of the building, I do have a sketch. I don't know whether it's the last page or the first page following the business brief, but
First page.
first page on yours. That was my calculation. The lower portion of the page is the 5-story building, and the dimensions and associated square footage for it. The upper portion, or the northern part of the building, is an addition that was put on in 1946, I believe it was. It's 1-story warehouse, so that's 19,701 square feet, and the 5-story part is 18,168 per floor. So all totaled, not including, there is a mezzanine floor as well, an office mezz, has a lower ceiling on it, so we've not included that in our total area. But this is just to show that the total building without the mezzanine is 110,541 by my calculation. Over the years, several appeal hearings, the leasable area has been knocked down to 98,300. I did inspect the property. They are using the entire building, including the vaults that are in there. But we have tried to reflect some functional obsolescence in this building. There are locker areas that would probably be unlikely used by any other tenant. It is suitable for the present use. There's also the concrete columns supporting the structure, larger than usual and closer together than usual. That would also reduce some of the utility of the space. But all in all, I think we've reduced it already by whatever that works out to, I believe around 11%, going at the 98,300. Further to that, you look at the quality of the space. There's only 2 warehouse doors off of the back lane, which is known as Huntley Street. It does not have dock level loading by the doors. There is a dock inside the premise in one portion. With the lower ceilings, the floor plan laid out, it has 1 freight elevator, has a passenger elevator. Overall, the quality is low. It's an all concrete structure for the 5-story part. After considering all things, I believe that 2.25 would be appropriate for this building. So that is my recommendation, to reduce the base rent from the 280 to 2.25, adding for utility costs. And I would ask that you would reduce the assessment to $421,500. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming you're not accepting the recommendation. Thank you. Do you have any
With
questions?
regret, I'm not accepting it. Mr. Holden and I have had some very candid discussions.
Okay. And do you have questions of Mr. Allen in his presentation?
I do. You indicated in your presentation that it's suitable for present use, and I'm assuming what you meant by that is it can be used as a printing shop of the level of production that Cromar has.
Yes, it can be used for storage as well. The previous use before Cromar was a storage business, so both uses are appropriate.
Have you found other printing shops in Winnipeg that are on multi-levels?
Offhand, I don't believe so.
Yeah, I suggest to you that normally they're single level, usually in the newer part of the warehouse district where everything's on one floor. And I've
That
inspected
would
them.
probably be the case due to the heavy equipment and whatnot. They probably keep it on the main floor. They do have a lot of the upper floors in this particular building are storage use.
And for storage use, given the fact that there's only one freight elevator, would you say that for storage alone, $225 a square foot would be reasonable?
I think it would overall. It is a large freight elevator along with the passenger one. It does have the capacity to move a lot of freight upwards. In its former use as a storage company, they even have vehicles would go up to the upper floors.
Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Stenning?
So this building was, it's kind of assessed, or was as a not storage, what am I thinking of?
We label it as a industrial warehouse, but
Yeah, warehouse, that's what I'm doing.
the subcategory we have it as loft warehouse because it has
Yeah.
the multi-level.
Is there any retail out of here?
I don't believe so.
That's all I had to ask.
Great.
No questions.
I'm sorry, I missed at the beginning. What year is this building?
Originally, the 5-story part's 1929, and the 1-story portion was 1946.
And you indicated that's on the back of the building?
The north side, at the back, yeah. The front is off of Portage, the 5-story part, and then the back is further back, or north of that.
Okay. And when did you inspect this building, Mr. Alden?
Sometime last week, Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay. Is this the first time it's been inspected for a while?
I think so. It's the first time I've been in it, actually, but I'm not sure. I didn't recall reading in the notes when the last inspection would have been on it.
Okay. And so this building is still being used as what specifically?
Printing company, yeah, they do printing, commercial printing.
Okay.
And a lot of they store printed materials as well as just paper and whatnot. But we went floor per floor, and they're using the whole building. Included, there is one floor that has, you gave me the floor plans here. This is for the 5-story portion of the building. I had heard there's these vaults in there. It is only on the 2nd floor along the west side. But I showed that they even have storage in those for boxes and stuff.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Would you like to proceed with your presentation?
Yes, I have provided you with a slight brief. I suppose 5 pages is not necessarily brief. There's not much argument with the city on both the quality or the nature or the use of the building. It is used for a commercial printing operation. The building is the age described. It is concrete, reinforced concrete. It has unlevel floors because there's some stepping required in order to move machinery around, especially on the main floor where the addition was made. For some reason, they didn't match the floors. The premises are assessed at 98,300 square feet. Of this area, we'd submit only about 71,200 square feet is actually usable, comprising 70% of the area at 68,000 plus the 2,400 square foot office space. The city does view the premises to be 98.3 and is taking into consideration some of the lack of use of all the space, but I believe that in prior assessments, the 98,300 had been used and is being used by Mr. Alden today. The building is literally a concrete bunker, and the Department of National Defense has recognized it as such. I think that building would stand if Portage and Maine had a huge hit. And this building would continue. High ceilings, but very closely spaced columns. Upper level occupied by concrete vaults, and by that, I say not necessarily vaults with locking doors, but basically these are concrete cubicles. And if I look at Mr. Alden's presentation, he has a schematic of the second floor, and you can see along the west wall, it's all what is called vaults. And there's a few vaults on the east side as well. There are no vaults labeled per se on the other floors, but to the extent that there are cubicles, they are essentially unmovable, and I'm not sure that they're shown on the current sketches. The vaults are basically small cubicles in which they store paper, but it's very inefficient. I mean, you have to keep the size of the paper in the pallets you store in there and have to move them separately in and out like you would out of a closet. The building is located on Portage Avenue, just outside downtown, so from that respect it does appear advantageous, but parking for the applicant's employees is at a premium. The downtown area is a disincentive to keeping staff on late shifts, and there's additional costs of taxi services and increased lighting to ensure safety. The building is inefficient. As Mr. Alden said, it has no conventional loading dock, which of course when you're moving tons and tons of paper is essential. The building, the floors themselves have height variations, I referred to that, and that makes lifting of skids and pallets a little more inefficient. Large equipment is difficult to install, and significant additional costs involved for the operator for doing that. I mean, candidly, the owner has advised me that if it wasn't for the fact that they owned the building, they would probably not be operating their business out of there, but would be doing it on one level from a warehouse, probably somewhere in the industrial parts of the city. Other inadequacies, the only area air conditioned is the office. The rest of the building has no air conditioning. There are only 3 washrooms in the building, which is, by my count, now some of them are men and women, so they could be double washrooms, but clearly for a building of nearly 100,000 square feet, significant deficiencies of washrooms. For example, if you look at the second floor, where all the vaults are, there's no washroom on that floor at all. There is a washroom on the mezzanine, and there is no washroom on the 3rd floor, and there is a washroom on the 4th floor next to the lunchroom, and there's clearly a washroom on the main floor where the office is. So that's basically the layout. If you were to redo this building to have different tenants occupying it, by code, you'd have to have a lot more washrooms, and being a solid concrete building, that would be a chore to install. 1 6-passenger elevator and 1 freight elevator. Again, for a building this size, that may not be adequate. Original boiler, HVAC components, venting is not easily done. New elevator shafts can't be easily installed. The concrete vaults are permanent, no useful purpose and inefficient storage. Redesigning layouts, altering plumbing, HVAC system is cost prohibitive due to the design and the construction of the building. Elevator docks and loading docks are inadequate by modern standards. This is not the first time this building comes before you, and the building has been before the municipal board in the past. The first time the appeal was done was in 2000, and that's the time it got to the municipal board. And in the intervening 18 years, the only thing that's happened is the building has gotten older, and unlike fine wine, it has not improved with age. The municipal board's findings are attached at tab 1, and I've attached a full board decision, but important is the board's comments, which are equally applicable today, is, and I'll read it, the board accepts that there are significant limitations in this building. Its uneven floor levels, lack of parking, poor elevator service, and the fact that it's divided into a number of small rooms with high ceilings, which large support beams throughout, makes it less usable than other buildings of similar size. Nothing's changed. Same issues, same use, same form, same function. And I agree with Mr. Alden, there is no real proxy for this building anywhere else in the city being used the same way, so it's very hard to find a comparable in terms of rent that might be chargeable. So we're stuck with the owner's view of what the rent is and the city's view of what the rent is in trying to come to this, considering this appeal. The submission on value, I refer you back to the most recent board decision from 2016, which the decision is attached at tab 2. Important to note, the city did not appeal the board's decision, and that there's been no change in use or any upgrades to the building since then. In fact, if anything, the building has deteriorated. Currently, the sidewalk in front of the building has to be hoarded because there's debris falling from the building itself, and that's been now about a year or so. The board before you took the position essentially the same as the board of the municipal board, and simply said that 70% is what is an appropriate assessment level for this from what the city found. And I would submit to you nothing's changed, and I would urge you to do that. There is a market rent analysis to the extent that the owner was able to provide. The applicant says that $1.50 per square foot should be applied to the 67,130 square feet of storage / usable space, and $10 a square foot be applied to the office space for a total market rent of $124,695, and that's at the bottom of page 3 of my brief. There is not much argument with the city's cost to occupy. I think it is difficult to apportion the cost to occupy to the efficient and non-efficient portions of the space. So for the purposes of this appeal, the city's value of cost to occupy of $200,301 is accepted. Based on the owner's analysis, the annual rental, the assessed rental value of the building should be at $332,892. If the, sorry, no, that number's wrong, 200, my apologies. It should be $324,996. If you compare with the ARV, based on the same reasoning as the 2016 board, you take 475,560, multiply it by 70%, and you end up at 332,892. Not a material difference between the two approaches. It's about $8,000. I submit to you that the only thing that's changed in this building since the last assessment cycle is that the cost to occupy has gone up. And if you take the original rental value determined in 2016 and you simply add the new cost to occupy, you're probably exactly the same place where this building has been for the last 10 years. Accordingly, I submit that the annual rental value for the property be set at $332,989, which is 70% of the $475,560 assessed by the city, and it's lower than the recommendation by Mr. Alden of the $421,500 being a difference of about, I guess, difference about $90,000 in assessment. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Alden?
Thank you. You would agree that the company Cromar Printing is using the entire building, would you not?
I would agree that they're using the usable floor space, and to the extent there are inefficiencies in the building, they're there. I mean, they're not using it, but they're occupying it.
They're occupying it but not using it?
Well, you can't use the floor space occupied by concrete columns every 16 feet or so. You can't use parts of the concrete walls that are part of the vault. You can't use some of the step-ups and step-downs on the main. You have to separate those. But yeah, they're occupying the whole building. But the building is basically 30% inefficient.
You did comment on the uneven floor levels. Just to clarify that the floors that are there are flat floors, but there's different
They're
levels.
step-ups.
Steps.
Yeah, it's not like the floors are tilting or anything.
Yeah, and between the sections of different level floors, several of the floors do have ramps to accommodate transition from one area to the next, do they not?
Yes, they do, and those are necessary in order to allow wheeled equipment to be moved back and forth, but it's not efficient. It's unlike other buildings where the floors are on the same level. You don't have to channel all the traffic to a ramp. You just go through wherever the openings are and you move pallets and equipment as you wish. The key here is the inefficiencies generated by, in the operations, generated by the building. The cost to operate for this tenant is higher than a comparable tenant in a more modern warehouse setting. And that would reflect in the rental value of the building, because no tenant would pay the same level of rent given the inefficiencies. And that's really the key to this appeal.
You have been to and inspected the building?
Oh, I
correct?
see that building probably once every 6 months.
And although the 5-story portion was built in 1929, you would agree that the rate of depreciation is probably lower than most due to the solid nature of the business?
Well, the structure itself probably doesn't deteriorate. If we were using Marshall Swift, we'd be at a much lower percentage of deterioration than, say, a stick-built or just a bricks and mortar kind of building. There's no argument with that. But with that, comes the degree of inefficiency of retrofitting.
You don't have any comparisons, I agree, that it's hard to find comparable properties, but there's none to even compare to in your brief that we would use as a starting point to
No.
compare.
I do not, and candidly, the investigations that have been done, and I've done this appeal in the past, there's just nothing that I can even begin to point to as a reasonable proxy, so it's, to me, that would be futility.
All right, I think that's all my questions. I do have a closing comment though.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stebbins?
Yeah, when did Croma move into that building?
I think they've been there for 25 years, at
Yeah.
least. And I'm guessing on that. Certainly, the previous owners of Cromar had been operating out of that building, and I think the current ownership is about 20 years.
You keep referring to inefficiencies, and yet you haven't brought any pictures or anything to show where those inefficiencies may have a factor on the business?
Well, I could bring you pictures of the concrete
Well, no,
wall,
I'm just,
but
you know, because I'm
I
trying to...
didn't see much point in that. I think the city and we are both in agreement on the terms of the layout of the building. And the inefficiencies basically run from the fact that if you look at the city's brief, you see those columns. Those are very large concrete columns, those squares on the floor plan. And as you can see, they cannot be moved. That, for a loading facility, is inefficient. You see the way the first floor is laid out, the second floor is laid out, and you see the storage vaults all along the side. That's not efficient use of space.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is, do these inefficiencies that you are telling us, do they have any bearing on how the business is running?
Yes, they do. This business is not running as profitably as it might if it was located on a single level warehouse space. The only reason the owners stay there is because they own the building, and this would be a very difficult building to resell. The analysis has been done.
You also stated that the costs went up, or the costs are going up on that building, am I correct?
The cost to operate, well,
Yeah.
the city's costs are going up every year
Well, but that's,
because statistically that's what's happening. The maintenance costs on the outside, I think, are starting to go up. The cost of repairing the facade of the building will be something they have to budget. Attempting to modernize the building is fraught with extraordinary expenses which they're not prepared to undertake. So the building will continue to operate in its current space with the inefficiencies that it entails. You can't economically upgrade this building. That's the problem.
they which?
You cannot economically upgrade the building
Have they
because of
made
the
any
way it's...
attempt to
Yes.
sell the building and move to a better price?
There were discussions with potential market value as recently as a month ago. It's partially why I go there every 6 months for these kind of discussions. And Colliers, who've been engaged to do a market study, have come up with effectively not enough to be recovered from the sale of the building to pay off the existing mortgage and underpin the moving costs, which are huge. These are very large buildings. You have to understand, probably machinery probably bigger than this room that has to be moved, and these are very delicate machines, and the cost of moving them will be very
That's all I have, thank you very much.
Right?
Yes, I do have some questions. How did you arrive at 30% being unusable? Is it just a guess, or is it?
No, there was an assessment done before the municipal board in the appeal that took place in the year 2000, and they lifted from the expert's report that the building was 70% inefficient. If you look at the municipal board hearing, Mr. Roswell was the expert who provided evidence.
So how, like the actual measurements done, or how did?
If I recall correctly, Mr. Roswell actually went through the building and made detailed calculations of efficiencies and inefficiencies in the building. That number, 70%, was a hard number.
The city, or the city assessor mentioned that the total square footage of this building is 110,541, not including mezzanine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't agree or
So-
disagree.
So it seems, if this is true, then the city has already accepted that 10% or so of what 10% is unusable.
I don't know how the city originally arrived at its 98,300 square feet. That has been the number used on assessments from time immemorial on this. The last assessment cycle for which you have the decision in front of you was based on 98,300 feet.
The question I have is occupancy costs. If we look at particularly electricity and water, would that change even if, is that relevant to, is there a connection between that cost and the fact that 30% is not usable? Like, whatever electricity they use is what they'll use, and same with the water.
Well, the water rate at 19 cents per square foot presumes a normal number of washrooms. There's no way that in 3 washrooms you could use the level of water that would normally be ascribed to 98,000 square feet. So for that reason, the same as air conditioning. The air conditioning is only applied to the office portion because there's no air conditioning anywhere else. Well, there are floors there, there's no washrooms. So they're not going to be using water on that floor. The machinery is not water cooled. So if you were to drill down and really try to determine the real cost to occupy, that too would have to change. For the purposes of this appeal, I simply agree.
We don't really know what the real cost is, right? Or it's not shown here, I should say.
No, I mean,
Right.
I didn't pull the
Yeah.
utility accounts. I did that probably several years ago, and it came in lower than the city's numbers. But again, at that time, the board was not receptive to that. They said the city's applicable number is the city's applicable number.
All right, that's all my questions.
Okay. Do you happen to know what this building was originally built for in 1929?
I believe it was built as a furniture warehouse. I think it was with retail on the main floor and storage up at the top. And then at a later date, they used it to store vintage cars, which is what the vaults are for. And had been running as a warehouse until Cromar ended up buying the building and operating, and that was before the current owner.
Okay. Do you know how many employees are in this building?
I do not, and I wouldn't even venture
Excuse me,
a
what was
guess.
that question, Kerry?
I was asking how many employees, if you knew how many employees were in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a number on that.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say more than 25?
I'd be venturing a guess. I know that there's probably 4 in the office, because that's where I spend most of my time.
Okay. So, page, in your brief, on page 2, you're talking about the inadequacies of the building. The building still has the original boiler, and the original HVAC components. What about the electrical?
I believe the electrical was probably upgraded because every time you install a new piece of equipment, it has to be wired. So I think during the times that they have been changing out equipment, I think the building has been rewired. I don't think the service has been changed. I believe it has 600 amp 3-phase, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Also, bottom of page 2, it talks about the board accepting the significant limitations. They talk about lack of parking. Do you know how many parking stalls there are?
Not enough, but I couldn't give you a number.
Okay.
Parking in that part of the city is a bit of a premium, not much street parking. The building next, west of this building is WRHA, and they chew up an awful lot of parking. The 755 Portage, the new WRHA building, is the one immediately west of this building.
I have one more question here. Oh, yeah, the columns. How big are these columns?
These columns would be, every bit of this would be what, 3.5 feet, 4 feet square? 4 feet
Okay.
square.
So-
They're larger than normal. Normal would be about 4 feet. You
I can
measure
comment
these,
on
Steve?
that. I didn't actually measure them, but I did take note of them at the time. They were different sizes depending on the floors, but I'd say at most they're 2 feet square.
That would be that? I don't think so. That,
Oh,
you're
it's-
showing about 3.5 feet there.
Yeah.
That's 3.5 feet?
Yeah.
No,
2.5.
can't be.
2.5 feet?
Okay,
That's 12 inches.
this is
right
11
there.
inches. This is 11
Yeah,
inches.
that's 11 inches.
So,
Yeah.
so you
There's
got-
22.
Yeah,
Right.
it's 22, yeah.
So,
That would be 22
Yeah.
inches.
That would be a pretty good estimate of how big the
Yeah.
columns
Okay.
would be, I'd say.
Having not measured the columns, I can't quibble with
so
the
are these,
assessor.
so then are these columns located on every floor?
Every floor.
Okay, and is this like, I'm just gonna be asking both of you now. So, this diagram that's in your brief, are these the columns, these
Yes.
squares?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay, so has the city, so are these columns on every floor and in this,
On the 5-story portion of the building,
okay,
yeah.
and in this particular pattern?
Yes.
So-
if you look at the third floor plan, which is the one that's the most open, you can see the rows of columns, and they go right through the building.
Okay. So it's looking like there's at least 20 per
1,
floor?
2, 3, 4, 5,
More
6,
than
7,
20.
8, 9, 10,
5, 6, 7,
16, 18, 20,
more,
22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34. I count 35.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'd say 35, yeah.
okay.
Give or take.
So is the city, when you're talking about 98,000 square feet, are you taking that into consideration at all?
Well, yeah, in my closing remarks, I was gonna comment on the area that we've already accounted for inefficiencies such as the columns, although these columns, if they are only around 4 square feet each, that's only gonna be, several hundred square feet out of this 110,000 total. But we are reflecting the fact that, yeah, that's space that can't be used, although every loft warehouse has some columns of some sort.
Is it not unusual to have that number of columns
Yeah,
on
these-
every
these
single
one-
floor?
Yeah, these ones are closer together and a little bit larger, so, yeah.
Was there also, sorry, I'm just directing questions to both of you, was there also any consideration given by the fact that this is concrete and sort of bunker-like in nature? It's been, I think, page 1 on the brief, it was Mr. Frollinger's brief, it was talked about that the DND has designated this as a secure command and control facility for use during civil emergencies or natural catastrophes.
I've been advised of that by the owners.
The concrete nature of it, yeah, it would have limitations for different businesses, but it can also be an advantage. The floor load is set so high that you could operate anything in there, put any weight equipment, 100 pounds per square inch.
Assuming you could get it up to the
Yeah,
elevator.
the elevator can obviously accommodate automobiles, so it can put some heavy stuff in there, so. On one hand, it's an advantage, on the other hand, it's somewhat limiting as well.
Okay, because certainly only a certain amount of businesses would require that. Mr. Frollinger, are you aware at all if this building came up in assessment?
The building, if I
Property
remember
assessment.
correctly, is assessed at about just under $900,000, and I'm going on memory, I don't have the realty assessment roll on this file. It has come up in the past and was reduced in the past. It did not come up in this assessment cycle because the assessment was found to be reasonable.
Okay. And also in your brief, you talked about the, let's see, page 2 towards the bottom, you're saying that the sidewalk on Portage has to be protected from falling debris from the facade of the building?
That is correct. It's been like that for, if I remember correctly, for about a year and a half now.
Okay, what exactly is falling from the building?
I believe pieces of brick. The front of the building is brick clad. It's got a brick facade, and I think that has deteriorated.
Okay, and so, and what sort of protection has been,
It's you have almost like across the street here, you've got the steel sides, plywood platform on top, and the traffic walks under the plywood in that cage.
okay, that was provided by the owner?
That is correct.
So was he cited?
No, he's
No.
just wanted to make sure that there were no accidents while they figure out how to best protect the building.
Thank you, that's all my questions. And I'm sorry, Mr. Alden, you would like to speak further?
Yeah, the fact that the previous assessment cycle, the board decision did choose to reduce the assessment and use the ratio of 70% at the time. But again, at the time, we've only been assessing 98,300 square feet. And I believe that that's because over the years it keeps being brought up that there's limited use of the space and whatnot. That's really why I wanted to go out there to see if they are using the whole building. And they are, by my calculations, to the rounded half a foot, we have 110,000 square feet, well, even greater than that, of space, not including the mezzanine floor, which has a limited height, but it is usable office space. So we're looking at a minimum of 110,000 feet that they're using in the building. We're already reducing it to 98, and then I think the board erred in taking 70% of that now. I think we're double dipping on the inefficiencies of how much space is used and the condition and whatnot, so. My recommendation of the 2.25 per square foot, I think we've already considered that by assessing only 98,300 square feet. So I don't think we should be using the 98,000 ARV right now and then taking another 70% of that off, or 30% off, sorry. Anyway, that's my comment on it. I'll leave it with you.
So, for your recommendation for the 421.5, that was at 2.25?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything in summation you wish
Just
to say?
in summary, the 98,000 square foot assessment has been around for 18 years. I believe in part it was a recognition by the city that, yeah, these columns are there and that takes something out of the square footage and the floor space, and that the walls that are dividing the vaults also makes floor space unavailable. That reduction from, I think it was 110 down to 98, was as a result of that. It doesn't come into the other inefficiencies of the building in terms of the ability to use the space. That's just taking space out of the enclosure. The inability to use the space is as a result of the configuration of the building. And for example, Mr. Alden spoke about ramps. If you look at the fourth floor, sorry, not the fourth floor, the Yeah, if you look at the very first schematic, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner a ramp. That's to connect those two sections. And that's really the only reasonable connection in there because everything else is walled off. If you look at the fifth floor, which is the very last schematic provided by Mr. Alden, again, you see the freight elevator, you see the ramp. There's no other place to do it because that's the only place you can cross from the front of the building to the back of the building. And there is basically significant inefficiencies in doing that. So the inefficiencies of the building are not necessarily be able to be determined by square footage, but it would certainly at a minimum impact on the base rent. Nobody's going to pay market rents for a building that is going to be that inefficient. So either way you look at it, you can look at it on the basis of the proposal by the appellant that the square footage be $1.50, not $2.25, or you look at it the way the board did it. The last one, you just simply reduce the assessment by 70%. The difference is not that great. The difference is about $8,000. So by both tests, it works out to the same. And I submit to you that $2.25 just can't be sustained for this building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.